At my graduation party, my father raised his glass and looked right past me. He looked at my younger sister and said, "I wish it was you holding that diploma today, because you are the only child who has ever truly made me proud." My mother smiled and nodded in agreement. I just sat there in my graduation sash, letting the heavy silence hang in the air before I made a move that would financially ruin them all. My name is Kiara. I am 32 years old, and tonight was supposed to be the culmination of years of silent struggle. Before I tell you how a single dinner bill led to the absolute destruction of my family's fake empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to build your own table because your family constantly refused to give you a seat. We were sitting in a private room at one of the most exclusive five-star steakhouses in downtown Atlanta. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, expensive glow over the white tablecloths, but the atmosphere at our table was freezing cold. I was still wearing my graduation sash over my tailored black dress, having just received my Master of Business Administration in Real Estate Finance. It took me years of grueling night classes, working double shifts, and aggressively hiding my true income to reach this moment. I thought earning a graduate degree from a top-tier university would finally earn me a shred of respect from the people who brought me into this world. I was incredibly and deeply foolish to think logic or achievement could ever overcome their lifelong favoritism. My father, Terrence, tapped his silver fork against his crystal champagne flute. He stood up, smoothing the lapels of a suit I knew he could barely afford. Everyone at the table turned their attention to him. I actually felt a brief flicker of genuine hope, thinking that for the very first time in my life, my father was going to publicly acknowledge my hard work. Instead, his eyes slid right past me and landed directly on my 29-year-old sister, Jasmine. Jasmine was busy adjusting her perfect silk extensions for a selfie ring light she had shamelessly propped up right in the middle of the dinner table. She was the undisputed golden child of our family, the one who could do absolutely no wrong. To Jasmine, my father announced, his voice booming proudly across the quiet room. "Today we are gathered here not just for a piece of paper, but to celebrate real, tangible success. Jasmine, my beautiful daughter, you just hit 50,000 followers on your social media page. You are building a brand. You are showing the world what real influence looks like. I look at you, and I wish it was you holding that diploma today, because you are the only child who has ever truly made me proud." The words landed like a physical blow to my chest, knocking the wind entirely out of me. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap, willing myself not to react. I had spent the last decade secretly building a highly successful private equity firm, from the shadows buying up commercial properties and revitalizing urban neighborhoods, while they all thought I was just some struggling administrative assistant fetching coffee. I did all of that to protect my peace and my assets from their toxic greed. But hearing my father openly wish my degree belonged to my sister was a new level of emotional cruelty that I was not prepared for. My mother, Yvonne, immediately leaned over and patted Jasmine on the hand before shooting me a sharp, condescending glare. "Do not sit there looking so bitter, Kiara." She snapped, her voice loud enough for the waiter filling our water glasses to hear. "You getting a degree at 32 is not really a big deal. You are just playing catch-up. Jasmine just hit 50,000 followers, and that is real influence." I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, trying to steady my racing heart. I did not drop out 10 years ago because I was lazy or unmotivated. I dropped out because they secretly took out a massive predatory loan in my name to fund Jasmine's failed hair boutique, destroying my credit and forcing me to work 3 minimum wage jobs just to avoid total bankruptcy. But bringing up that painful reality would only result in more gaslighting from the woman who gave birth to me. My mother had spent my entire life making me feel inadequate because I embraced my natural hair, while she praised Jasmine for her expensive weaves and lighter skin. That is when Connor decided to insert himself into the conversation. Connor is Jasmine's 34-year-old husband. He is a white man from a wealthy suburb who desperately tries to appropriate Black culture to sound edgy and relevant. He calls himself a crypto entrepreneur, but he spends far more time posting inspirational quotes online than actually doing any verifiable business. My parents worshipped Connor simply because he was a white man in a suit, equating his mere presence to ultimate success for our family, while treating my actual hard work like a footnote. Connor leaned back in his leather chair, flashing an unnatural smile. He signaled the waiter to bring the check to the table. When the waiter handed over the black leather folder, Connor did not even bother to open it. He just slid it directly across the large table until it hit my plate with a dull thud. "You got the big fancy degree now, right, sis?" Connor said, putting on his forced urban accent that always made my skin crawl. "Time to step up and pay the piper. Consider this the black tax for putting up with your bitter attitude all night. We came out here to celebrate your little school project, so the least you can do is cover the tab." I took a slow, deep breath and stared at the leather folder resting ominously in front of me. The bill was for exactly $3,500. They had ordered the most expensive Wagyu steaks, vintage champagne towers, and imported seafood platters. Jasmine had even ordered 2 lobsters just to take a picture of them for her followers before sending them back because they did not match her outfit aesthetic. They had racked up a massive bill, fully expecting to dump the financial burden on the daughter they had just spent the last hour publicly humiliating. Jasmine laughed softly, tapping away on her phone without even looking up. "Come on, Kiara," she chimed in, her tone dripping with entitlement. "Connor is right. You have been walking around with that sash all night acting like you are better than us. Pay the bill so we can go. Connor and I have a very important VIP party to get to, and my followers are waiting for my outfit check." I looked at my father, who was busy finishing his scotch, ignoring the blatant disrespect happening right in front of him. I looked at my mother, who was glaring at me, daring me to embarrass her in front of her perfect white son-in-law. They wanted to break me tonight. They wanted to remind me that no matter what I achieved, I would be beneath them. But I was no longer the frightened girl they kicked out 10 years ago. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or throw a tantrum. Instead, I slowly reached into my designer clutch, preparing to drop a heavy reality check on them that they would never recover from in this lifetime. The morning sunlight hits the imported marble countertops of my Atlanta penthouse, creating a blinding reflection. The camera slowly tracks left, following my movements as I pull a fresh shot of espresso from my machine. The city sprawls out below me through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glittering monument to the power of building something from absolute nothing. The serene silence of my kitchen is aggressively broken by the constant buzzing of my phone. It has been vibrating relentlessly against the stone island since 6 in the morning. I do not rush to pick it up. I take my time, inhaling the rich, bitter aroma of the coffee before finally turning the screen over. The family group chat is an absolute disaster zone. You would logically think that dropping a Centurion card on a $3,500 dinner bill would elicit some form of apology or at least a moment of quiet self-reflection. But my family does not operate on logic or shame. They operate on pure, unadulterated greed. The initial shock from last night has completely evaporated and has been rapidly replaced by a ravenous hunger. Instead of apologizing for publicly humiliating me, they smell money. I scroll past dozens of missed calls from my mother and focus on a massive block of text from Jasmine. There is no greeting. There is no expression of remorse for the cruel things she said just hours prior. She writes that since I have clearly been hiding a massive amount of wealth from the people who raised me, it is time for me to pay my dues. She says her husband Connor ran some financial projections overnight, and they decided I need to fund her new lifestyle brand. They are explicitly demanding $150,000 in seed money by the end of the week. She actually has the nerve to end the message by telling me not to be a selfish hater and reminding me that family is supposed to support family. I let out a short, dry laugh. The audacity is truly breathtaking. Before I can even fully process the sheer entitlement of her demand, another notification pops up on the screen. A voicemail from my father. I press play and set the phone down on the counter, letting his voice echo through my pristine kitchen. Terrence does not sound apologetic either. He sounds angry. He sounds exactly like a man who feels he has been robbed of his rightful property. He tells me that he knows I have serious money now, and he demands that I pay off the remaining mortgage on his barbershop immediately. He says I have been selfishly living a secret life of luxury while he struggles daily to keep his business afloat. His voice rises in volume and aggression as he declares that I owe this family for my life and that it is finally time to step up and show some respect to the man who put a roof over my head. I listen to the entire message with a completely blank expression. When his rant finally ends, I reach out and press the delete button. Erased. Just like that. I look out the windows at the morning traffic far below and let my mind drift back exactly 10 years. My father loves to talk about putting a roof over my head, but he conveniently forgets how eager he was to snatch it away. I was 22 years old, struggling through my undergraduate classes and working exhausting night shifts at a diner just to pay for my textbooks. Jasmine wanted to open a luxury hair boutique. She had zero business experience, zero capital, and a terrible credit score. She had gone to a predatory private lender who offered her an exorbitant amount of money at an interest rate that bordered on criminal. But she desperately needed a co-signer to secure the funds. My parents dragged me into the kitchen one night and slammed the heavily binding paperwork down on the table. They demanded I sign it. They told me it was my absolute duty as the older sister to support Jasmine's dreams no matter the personal cost. I read the contract and I flatly refused. I told them the loan was a massive trap, that the business would default, and that signing it would destroy my financial future before my adult life even truly began. The reaction was explosive and violent. Terrence screamed in my face, calling me a jealous, bitter failure who could not stand to see her beautiful sister shine. Yvonne packed my meager belongings into 3 black trash bags and literally threw them out onto the front lawn. They kicked me out into the freezing cold with nothing but the clothes on my back and less than $50 to my name. Jasmine stood in the doorway crying fake tears, claiming I was deliberately ruining her life because I was a hater. They happily chose her fabricated influencer dream over my basic physical survival. I spent the next 6 agonizing months living out of the back seat of my battered sedan, showering at a cheap local gym, and eating leftover discarded food from the diner. I dropped out of my undergraduate program because I could no longer afford the tuition or manage the immense emotional toll. I hit absolute rock bottom. But when you are buried in the dark, you have 2 choices. You can rot or you can grow. I chose to grow roots strong enough to shatter the concrete. I taught myself high-level finance by reading discarded books in public libraries. I managed to get an entry-level position at a small commercial real estate firm by sheer relentless persistence. I worked 90-hour weeks, learning every tax loophole, every zoning law, and every wealth-building strategy in the state of Georgia. I lived on ramen noodles and tap water, investing every single commission check I earned into distressed commercial properties. I flipped my first building and doubled my money. I rolled that profit into a strip mall. I built my private equity firm completely in the shadows, registering everything under anonymous corporate LLCs, so my family could never track me down and ruin my credit again. They thought they had discarded a useless piece of trash 10 years ago. They had absolutely no idea they had forged a lethal weapon. They threw me to the wolves and I returned leading the pack. I finished my espresso and placed the delicate cup in the stainless steel sink. My phone vibrates again. Another aggressive text from Connor asking exactly what time I am wiring the funds for Jasmine's brand. They actually believe this is a negotiation. They think because they share my blood, they are automatically entitled to the empire I built with my own bleeding hands. They think a few demanding text messages and an angry voicemail will bend me to their will. I lock my phone screen and turn my back to the Atlanta skyline. Let them text. Let them demand. Let them plan how to spend my money. They are about to learn a very painful lesson about boundaries and severe consequences. Because they do not just want my money. They want to force their way back into my life and take over my world entirely. I did not have to wait long for their next move. Less than an hour later, the soft chime of my private elevator echoed through the penthouse. My building requires keycard access for every single floor, and the penthouse level is entirely restricted. I stood frozen by the kitchen island, my coffee cup halfway to my mouth, as the heavy steel doors slid open directly into my private foyer. Out stepped Jasmine and Connor, dragging 4 massive, overstuffed suitcases behind them. They pushed past the entryway console, bringing the chaotic, desperate energy of the street right into my serene sanctuary. I later found out Connor had completely bypassed the building security by cornering the new weekend concierge. He spun a frantic, fabricated story about a family medical emergency, claiming he was my brother-in-law and needed immediate access to bring me my medication. The concierge, intimidated by a loud white man in a suit, simply panicked and swiped them up. They did not look like concerned family members. They looked like invaders. Connor dropped his heavy luggage onto my pristine imported hardwood floors, leaving a visible scuff mark. He did not say hello. He did not apologize for the scene at the steakhouse. Instead, he shoved his hands into his pockets and began pacing around my living room. He craned his neck to look up at the 20-foot ceilings, taking in the custom modern art hanging on the walls and the panoramic view of the city skyline stretching out beneath us. I could practically see the gears grinding in his head as he desperately tried to calculate the market value of every single item in the room. "Wow," Connor finally said, letting out a low whistle as he kicked his cheap loafers against the base of my marble coffee table. "Affirmative action really pays off, huh? I guess playing the system works if you know the right people." He turned to face me, completely ignoring the icy glare I shot at him. "Listen, we are taking the guest room. Our lease is up, and the landlord is being completely unreasonable about our renewal. Since you clearly have all this space and you obviously owe us for holding out on the family we are moving in." I stared at him, letting his sheer delusion hang in the quiet air of the room. He was a grown man facing eviction, trying to strong-arm his way into my home while simultaneously insulting my intelligence. But before I could even formulate a response, Jasmine decided to make her presence known. She dragged a massive duffel bag covered in heavily printed interlocking logos right onto my custom white Italian leather sofa. She did not ask for permission. She simply unzipped it right there in the middle of my living room, pulling out an overflowing makeup bag, a pair of designer heels, and a tangle of charging cords. "Kiara, you need to clear out at least half of the guest closet for me today," Jasmine ordered without even looking up from her bag. "My followers need a new backdrop for my outfit post, and this natural light is actually decent. Also tell your building staff they need to hold my PR packages downstairs. I cannot have my brand deals getting lost, and do not think we forgot about the seed money for my business. You can just wire that directly to Connor by Monday so we can get started." She tossed a pair of shoes onto my glass table, acting as if I was the hired help in a luxury hotel she had just booked. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it all was almost poetic. They had spent my entire adult life calling me a worthless failure, and now they were standing in the middle of the empire I built, trying to forcefully claim it as their own. They expected me to shrink. They expected me to revert back to the scared 22-year-old girl they had thrown out onto the street. They expected me to yell or cry or beg them to leave. I did not do any of those things. I did not waste my breath arguing with people who were committed to misunderstanding reality. I slowly walked over to the sleek smart home panel mounted on the wall near the kitchen. I pressed the red icon labeled Secondary Security. I did not break eye contact with Connor as the system registered my request. "What are you doing?" Connor demanded, his forced confidence faltering slightly as he noticed the absolute zero tolerance in my expression. "I am talking to you, Kiara. We are family. We are staying here until our new house is ready, and you are going to help us out." The secondary service elevator located just off the kitchen chimed loudly, interrupting his rant. The heavy doors opened and 2 massive private security guards stepped out into the apartment. They were dressed in immaculate black suits, their earpieces visible, their postures rigid and highly intimidating. They moved silently, flanking me on either side, waiting for my command. Connor took a sudden step back, bumping into the couch. Jasmine dropped her makeup bag, her jaw going slack as she stared at the two men towering over us. "Marcus," I said, addressing the lead guard, while keeping my eyes locked dead on my sister. "We have a severe pest control issue in the main living area. These two individuals bypassed the front desk under false pretenses. They are not family. They are unauthorized intruders." I stepped forward, closing the distance between myself and Jasmine. She shrunk back against the cushions, suddenly looking very small and very afraid. I offered her a bright, terrifyingly calm smile. "You have exactly 60 seconds to get your fake Chanel bags out of my house before I have you both arrested for trespassing." They did not take the full 60 seconds. At second 45, Connor practically shoved Jasmine into the private elevator, dragging those massive suitcases over the threshold with desperate, frantic energy. He even tried to swipe a small decorative gold bowl from the entryway console on his way out, but Marcus, my lead security guard, simply placed a massive hand on Connor's chest and stared him down until he dropped it back onto the table. Jasmine was sobbing now, but they were tears of pure humiliation, not regret. The heavy steel doors slid shut, cutting off Connor's frantic, empty threats about suing me. The camera pushes in closer now. "I want you to understand something very clearly. When you finally set a hard boundary with toxic family members, they do not just quietly walk away and reflect on their poor behavior. They do not suddenly realize the error of their ways and seek redemption. They declare absolute war. They do not retreat. They recruit." I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city below while pouring myself a fresh glass of sparkling water. I knew the retaliation was coming, but even I underestimated the sheer theatrical delusion of my mother. Less than 2 hours after Marcus escorted my sister and her fraud of a husband out of the lobby, my phone screen lit up with a notification from Facebook. It was a link sent by my cousin with a single question mark. I clicked on it. My mother, Yvonne, had gone live. She was sitting on the floral couch in her living room, clutching a crumpled tissue to her chest. She had clearly reapplied her mascara specifically so it could run dramatically down her cheeks. She stared directly into the camera lens and delivered an Oscar-worthy performance. She wailed to her hundreds of friends and church congregation members that she was completely broken-hearted. She called me a demonic, greedy woman who had turned her back on God and abandoned her own blood. She claimed I had stolen family funds to buy a luxury penthouse and was now living a life of sin. But the absolute climax of her unhinged broadcast was when she looked into the camera, let out a heart-wrenching sob, and told the world that I had violently thrown my pregnant sister out into the freezing streets, leaving her entirely homeless. I actually choked on my water laughing. Pregnant. Jasmine was not pregnant. She drank half a bottle of expensive wine at my graduation dinner last night, and she actively despises children. But my mother knew exactly what she was doing. She was weaponizing the ultimate narrative of female vulnerability to turn me into a monster. She was painting herself and Jasmine as the ultimate victims of my sudden, inexplicable cruelty. The fallout was instantaneous. My phone began vibrating so violently it nearly danced right off the kitchen island. The church aunties had received the bat signal. The notifications poured in like a relentless avalanche of holy judgment. Sister Margaret texted me saying she was organizing a prayer circle for my dark and twisted soul. Aunt Shirley left a 3-minute voicemail calling me a disgrace to the Black community for abandoning my family after they sacrificed everything for my education. Women who had not spoken to me in 10 years, women who had watched my parents throw me out onto the lawn a decade ago with absolute silence, were suddenly flooding my inbox with deeply hateful, venomous messages. They quoted scripture at me. They told me I would burn for what I had done to my poor, defenseless, pregnant sister. They demanded I open my doors and my checkbook to make amends before God struck me down. I did not block them. I simply muted the notifications and let them expose their own hypocrisy. Let them type out their furious, self-righteous essays. I needed the digital trail for what was coming next. But the social media smear campaign was just the opening act. The real escalation came later that afternoon. I was sitting at my home office desk reviewing quarterly projection reports when my personal cell phone rang. It was not a church auntie. It was Terrence. I answered the call, putting it on speaker and setting the phone down on the pristine glass surface of my desk. I did not say hello. I just let the line stay open. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little thief." Terrence snarled, his voice dripping with pure, unadulterated malice. "You think you can just flash a black card and kick your sister out like she is a dog? You think you own that empire? You do not own anything." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, letting him rant. "I am calling my lawyer right now," Terrence shouted into the receiver. "I am suing you for elder financial abuse. I am taking everything. Do you hear me? I am going to tell the judge that I gave you the startup money for your little business. I am going to tell the court that I gave you my life savings from the barbershop, and you stole it from me to build your firm. You owe me every single dime you have ever made. I built you, and I will tear you down." The sheer audacity of the lie was staggering. He was actually going to fabricate a story that he funded my private equity firm. He was going to claim he gave me his life savings, when the reality was he had kicked me out with exactly $50 and a trash bag full of cheap clothes. He was perfectly willing to commit aggressive perjury and drag me through a devastating legal battle just to violently seize the wealth I had bled to build. He was trying to financially ruin me and legally steal my empire. He thought I would be terrified of a lawsuit. He thought the threat of public court records and lawyers would make me submit and write a check to make it all go away. He thought he could bully me into submission. "Go ahead and call your lawyer Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a low, terrifying calm. "Call the best lawyer you can find. Because by the time I am finished with you, you are going to need one." I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the desk. The time for setting simple boundaries was completely over. They wanted to play legal games. They wanted to use the law to try and steal my life. It was time to call my own team and completely dismantle their entire reality. I opened my laptop and drafted an urgent email to my lead attorney and my forensic accountant. It was time to dig into the past. The polished glass doors of Sterling and Vance law firms slide open silently. I step into the expansive mahogany boardroom where my lead attorney Marcus and my forensic accountant Arthur are already waiting. I do not waste time with pleasantries or polite small talk. I place my tablet on the sleek conference table and immediately pull up the aggressive voicemail from Terrence, along with the utterly unhinged Facebook Live video my mother just posted. I let the evidence speak for itself. Marcus listens to my father threaten to sue me for elder financial abuse with a completely stoic expression. Arthur adjusts his glasses, taking meticulous notes, as Yvonne cries fake tears on the screen, claiming I am a demonic, greedy woman who threw my pregnant sister into the freezing streets. When the video finally ends, Marcus leans back in his heavy leather chair. He tells me that from a strictly legal standpoint, my mother is committing textbook public defamation, and my father is attempting a baseless financial shakedown. He says preparing a brutal cease and desist order will be incredibly simple, but Marcus is a seasoned professional who leaves absolutely nothing to chance. He turns to Arthur and instructs him to run a comprehensive microscopic forensic audit on every single financial move I have made since I was 18 years old. We need to completely bulletproof my assets. We need irrefutable documented proof that Terrence never gave me a single dime of startup capital for my private equity firm. We are going to bury his fraudulent claims under a mountain of hard, verifiable data. Arthur opens his laptop and gets to work. He is a financial bloodhound capable of tracking a single dollar through a complex maze of shell companies. He begins pulling up my entire financial history, starting from the anonymous corporate LLCs I use for my commercial real estate acquisitions, working his way backward through my initial property flips and digging deep into my early 20s. I sit by the window watching the afternoon traffic flow through downtown Atlanta, feeling a supreme sense of peace. I built my empire legally and flawlessly. I know there are zero vulnerabilities in my ledger. But then the steady clicking of Arthur typing suddenly stops. The silence in the boardroom becomes incredibly heavy. Arthur frowns, staring intently at his monitor. He takes off his glasses and looks at me with an expression of deep professional concern. He asks me to verify my activities from exactly 12 years ago when I was 20 years old. I tell him the truth. I was working double shifts at a diner, barely scraping by, taking community college classes and trying to build a foundation. I was utterly broke. Arthur turns his laptop screen around and pushes it across the large conference table. He tells me that according to the deep credit check and archived banking records he just pulled, I was not broke at all. According to these legally binding documents, I was the sole guarantor of a $200,000 commercial business loan. The air in the room completely vanishes. I stare at the digital scans of the banking documents, feeling my blood run ice cold. My name is printed at the very top of the loan agreement. My social security number is listed. And at the bottom of the final page is my signature. But it is not my signature. The loops and angles are a clumsy, desperate forgery. Someone had deliberately and meticulously practiced writing my name to steal my identity. I look at the dates on the documents, and a sickening wave of realization crashes over me. 12 years ago, my credit score mysteriously plummeted overnight. Collection agencies began calling my cheap prepaid cell phone at all hours of the day and night, demanding payments for massive accounts I had never opened. I remember sitting on the floor of my cramped apartment sobbing because I could not even get approved for a basic student credit card to buy my textbooks. I spent my entire early 20s working cash jobs, living in constant fear of financial ruin, and ultimately living in my car after my parents kicked me out. I had always assumed the credit destruction was just a tragic byproduct of the predatory loan my parents had tried to force me to co-sign for Jasmine's hair boutique, the loan I had flatly and aggressively refused to sign. But this document proves they did not accept my refusal. Terrence and Yvonne simply waited until my back was turned, stole my social security card, and forged my signature on an entirely different, massive commercial loan. They secretly saddled their 20-year-old daughter with $250,000 in high-interest debt, destroying my financial life before it even began. Marcus is practically vibrating with legal fury. He states that this is felony identity theft and wire fraud on a massive federal scale. He immediately orders Arthur to trace the money. We need to know exactly where that $200,000 went. If Terrence and Yvonne took out the loan to fund their failing barbershop or to pay off their own debts, we have them dead to rights and can send them straight to prison. Arthur's fingers fly across the keyboard. He hacks through the archived routing numbers, tracing the massive wire transfer from the lending bank to its final destination. He follows the money through a secondary holding account and finally tracks it to a corporate LLC registered in the state of Georgia. Arthur reads the name of the LLC aloud, and the floor completely drops out from underneath me. It was not the barber shop. It was not a luxury hair boutique for Jasmine. The $200,000 of stolen money was wired directly into the business account of a tech startup that went completely bankrupt less than 8 months after it launched. Arthur clicks on the corporate registry to reveal the sole proprietor of the failed startup. Connor. I grip the edge of the mahogany table so hard my knuckles turn white. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal is so profound it feels like a physical knife twisting in my ribs. Terrence and Yvonne did not just favor Jasmine. They did not just treat me like a second-class citizen in my own home. They actively, violently sacrificed me. They committed multiple federal felonies and gladly destroyed their own black daughter's entire financial future just to bankroll the empty, fraudulent promises of a mediocre white man. They worshipped Connor's mere presence so deeply that they stole my identity to hand him $250,000 on a silver platter. They ruined my 20s to elevate a man who brought them absolutely nothing but failure. It all makes perfect, sickening sense now. Connor's absolute arrogance when he walked into my penthouse demanding seed money. He was not just acting entitled, he was repeating history. He thought I existed solely to fund his delusions because my parents had explicitly taught him that my life and my credit were acceptable collateral for his success. Marcus looks at me, waiting for my instruction. The cease and desist order is no longer enough. The defamation suit is absolute child's play compared to what we just uncovered. I stand up from the conference table, feeling a new, terrifying kind of power surging through my veins. I tell Marcus to draft the criminal complaint. I tell Arthur to prepare the financial dossiers for the federal authorities. I do not just want to stop their smear campaign anymore. I want to systematically dismantle their entire lives. I want to take everything they have ever loved. The camera pans smoothly across the polished expanse of my mahogany desk as I lean forward, bridging the physical distance between myself and my elite legal team. I look directly into Marcus's eyes and make my intentions crystal clear. A simple lawsuit for identity theft is no longer the objective. Putting Terrence and Yvonne in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud is entirely too easy. I do not just want to sue them for what they stole from me 12 years ago. They need to understand the absolute devastation of trusting the wrong person. I want to completely dismantle the false reality they have worshipped for the past decade. I turn to Arthur. I tell him to stop looking at my past and to aggressively target Connor's present. Connor loves to parade around Atlanta high society, playing the role of a visionary crypto entrepreneur. He loves throwing around tech buzzwords and acting as if he is the brilliant financial savior of our family. I instruct Arthur to find the physical infrastructure of this so-called digital empire. I want the blockchain records. I want the server locations. I want the offshore accounts and the wallet addresses. I want to know exactly how a man with no verifiable coding skills and no legitimate business acumen affords to eat Wagyu steak and buy my sister designer bags. Arthur barely blinks. His fingers fly across his keyboard, accessing financial databases that average citizens do not even know exist. Within 2 hours, the digital veil masking Connor's entire existence is violently ripped away. Arthur projects his findings onto the large smart screen mounted on my office wall. The financial web displayed before us is not a legitimate tech startup. It is not an innovative crypto exchange. It is a textbook highly illegal Ponzi scheme. Connor has absolutely no product. He has no proprietary algorithm and no actual trading platform. He is simply taking new money to pay off the initial investors while siphoning the vast majority of the cash directly into his own personal offshore accounts to fund Jasmine's lavish lifestyle. But the true horror of the situation reveals itself when Arthur pulls up the master list of the primary investors. I stare at the high-definition screen and feel a sickening wave of revulsion wash over my entire body. I recognize almost every single name on the ledger. These are not wealthy Silicon Valley venture capitalists. They are not institutional investors who can afford to take a risk. They are Sister Margaret. They are Aunt Shirley. They are Deacon Hayes. Connor has been actively and aggressively targeting the elderly African-American congregation at my parents' church. The very same church aunties who spent their morning flooding my phone with hateful messages, calling me a demonic, greedy woman, have unknowingly handed their entire life savings over to my sister's husband. And he did not do it alone. The documentation shows that Terrence served as the primary character reference for the investment fund. Connor expertly leveraged my father's trusted standing in the community to convince vulnerable elderly people to drain their pensions and invest in a completely fabricated digital currency. Terrence essentially acted as the Judas goat, leading his own loyal congregation directly to the financial slaughterhouse so his precious white son-in-law could play at being rich. I sit back in my ergonomic chair, thoroughly disgusted by the absolute moral rot of the people who share my blood. They financially sacrificed their own daughter 12 years ago to fund this man, and now they are sacrificing their entire community to keep him afloat. But Arthur is not finished. He pushes his glasses up his nose and tells me there is one final piece to this catastrophic puzzle. A Ponzi scheme requires a constant, massive influx of cash to survive. When the well of church elders started running dry, Connor needed a massive injection of liquidity to keep the illusion alive and avoid an immediate federal investigation. Arthur clicks open a scanned property deed. It is the deed to my parents' house, the exact same house they kicked me out of 10 years ago. The legal paperwork shows that exactly 7 months ago, a massive second mortgage was taken out against the property. The signature on the authorization line belongs to Terrence. Either my father is so completely blinded by his worship of Connor that he willingly signed away the equity of his own home, or Connor manipulated the paperwork and forged the authorization just like my parents forged my signature all those years ago. Regardless of how the ink got on the page, the money from that second mortgage went directly into Connor's failing Ponzi scheme. And because the scheme generates absolutely zero revenue, Connor has not made a single payment on that loan. Arthur highlights a bright red legal notice filed just 48 hours ago. The lender is not waiting around for excuses. They have officially initiated aggressive foreclosure proceedings. Terrence and Yvonne are exactly 30 days away from the bank seizing their property and violently locking them out into the street. They are actively facing total homelessness. The supreme irony of the situation leaves me completely breathless. Terrence left me a vicious voicemail this morning threatening to sue me for his life savings. Yvonne went on Facebook Live to cry to her congregation about me abandoning my family and throwing my sister into the cold. They are attacking me with unparalleled ferocity, while standing inside a house that they no longer even own. They have dedicated their entire lives to elevating a man who has brought them nothing but empty promises and total financial ruin. Connor has stolen the roof right from over their heads, and they are completely oblivious to the impending collapse. I look at Marcus, and a slow, cold smile spreads across my face. I tell my lead attorney to stop drafting the cease and desist. We are not going to warn them. We are going to invite them over. It is time to bring this entire family together for a final mandatory meeting. I instruct Arthur to pull up the exact details of the private lending firm currently holding the second mortgage on my parents' house. I also need the complete file on the institution that underwrote Connor's initial fraudulent business loans. Arthur's fingers fly across his keyboard, and within seconds he projects the lender information onto the glass screen. It is a mid-tier, aggressive private capital group based right here in Atlanta. They are notorious for handing out high-interest loans to desperate borrowers and then ruthlessly pursuing foreclosure the second a payment is missed. According to Arthur's data, they are currently holding a highly toxic portfolio of debt attached to Connor and my father. They are sweating. Connor's Ponzi scheme is rapidly imploding, and the massive mortgage on my parents' house is in total default. Foreclosures are incredibly messy, time-consuming, and expensive for private lenders. They want liquid cash, not a prolonged legal battle over a depreciating suburban asset. Marcus watches me closely, his sharp legal mind already catching up to my train of thought. He asks if I want him to notify the FBI about the forged signatures and the Ponzi scheme immediately. I shake my head. I tell Marcus that the federal authorities will absolutely get their turn to dismantle Connor and Terrence, but they are going to have to wait in line. If the government seizes those assets, or if the current lender forecloses, my family gets to play the ultimate victim. They will spin a tragic story to their church congregation about being targeted by the ruthless banking system. Yvonne will cry on Facebook about losing her beloved family home to corporate greed. I refuse to let them have that narrative. I refuse to let an anonymous bank take the house that they physically threw me out of a decade ago. I am going to be the one who takes it. I lean forward and place my hands flat on the mahogany table. I tell Arthur to contact the lending firm immediately using one of my most heavily shielded corporate LLCs. He is to offer them a lump sum cash buyout for the entire distressed debt portfolio tied to Terrence, Yvonne, and Connor. Every single promissory note, every second mortgage, every defaulted business loan. I want it all bundled together and purchased. Arthur smiles a cold, highly professional smile. He notes that since the debt is performing terribly and sitting in active default, the lender will be absolutely desperate to offload the risk. We can buy the entire portfolio for pennies on the dollar. I tell him to execute the trade. Do not negotiate. Do not haggle over minor percentages. Just bury them in cash and secure the paper today. The next 48 hours are a masterclass in the terrifying efficiency of boundless wealth. My acquisition team moves with lethal precision. The private lending firm is absolutely thrilled to wash their hands of Connor's toxic financial waste. They do not ask questions about the anonymous holding company buying the debt. They simply see a massive wire transfer clear their accounts and immediately sign over all the rights, titles, and interests. I spend those 2 days operating in a state of absolute hyper-focused calm. I continue attending my regular board meetings. I approve architectural plans for a new commercial development downtown. I drink my morning espresso while looking out over the Atlanta skyline. But beneath the surface of my daily routine, a massive invisible trap is snapping shut around the people who share my blood. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus walks into my penthouse office carrying a thick black leather folder. He places it on my desk with a heavy, satisfying thud. He does not say a word. He simply opens the folder and steps back. I look down at the pristine legal documents resting on my desk. They are the official deeds of assignment and the transferred promissory notes. I pick up the first document. It is the original loan agreement from 12 years ago. The one where Terrence and Yvonne completely destroyed my credit by forging my signature to fund Connor's first failed business. I stare at the clumsy fake signature at the bottom of the page. I trace the ink with my fingertip, remembering the profound terror of being 20 years old, homeless, and buried under a mountain of fraudulent debt. I remember the collection agencies calling me relentlessly. I remember the sheer panic of having my entire future stolen by the people who were supposed to protect me. Then I pick up the newest document in the stack. It is the deed of assignment for the second mortgage on their current house. Marcus hands me a solid gold custom fountain pen. I take the pen and smoothly sign my authentic, powerful signature on the final acquisition contract. The ink dries instantly. I set the pen down and lean back in my chair, letting the profound reality of the moment wash over me completely. The legal transfer is absolute and irreversible. I am now legally the bank. I own the exclusive rights to the massive, crippling debt Connor used to build his fake empire. I own the fraudulent loans my parents took out by stealing my identity. But most importantly, I own the physical deed to the house where I grew up. The house where Yvonne packed my belongings in trash bags. The house where Terrence screamed in my face and called me a worthless, bitter failure. I own the literal roof over their heads. They are sitting in their living room right now, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire existence has just been purchased by the daughter they threw away. They think they are fighting a battle over a simple steakhouse dinner bill and a few angry text messages. They have absolutely no idea that the ground beneath their feet is already gone. I look up at Marcus and Arthur, who are waiting quietly for my next directive. The trap is fully set. The weapons are loaded. It is time to stop ignoring their frantic phone calls. It is time to finally answer them. I instruct Marcus to send a formal, legally binding courier directly to my parents' house and to Connor's apartment. I am officially inviting all of them to my penthouse for a mandatory family meeting. I tell my team to prepare the boardroom. The golden child and her fraudulent husband are about to face the ultimate audit. I look at Marcus and Arthur and slowly shake my head. I tell Marcus to cancel the legal courier. A sterile corporate boardroom is far too clinical for the execution I have planned. These people operate entirely on optics, social standing, and public performance. They crave an audience. They want to be treated like royalty. I am going to give them the exact stage they desire right before I burn it to the ground. I pick up my personal cell phone and open the family group chat. It is a chat thread I have had on silent for nearly 3 years, usually just a repository for my mother to brag about Jasmine or for my father to post passive-aggressive religious quotes about honoring thy parents. I stare at the blinking cursor for a moment, calculating the exact phrasing required to exploit their blinding greed. I type slowly, ensuring the tone is perfectly submissive. You guys were right. I have been selfish. I want to make it up to you. I have booked a private dining room at the Capitol Grill for a reconciliation dinner. I have a massive surprise for Jasmine and Connor. I hit send and place the phone face up on the glass desk. Marcus raises an eyebrow at the tactic, but Arthur simply smirks, adjusting his glasses. We do not have to wait long. It takes exactly 4 minutes for my mother to take the bait. The screen lights up with a notification from Yvonne. There is absolutely no warmth, no grace, and no motherly relief in her response. She simply writes that it is about time I remembered my place. Bring your checkbook. Less than 2 minutes later, Connor chimes into the chat. His arrogance is so profound it borders on comedic. He texts that he is glad I finally woke up, sis. Have that $150,000 ready. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. The sheer delusion is staggering. They genuinely believe they have won. They think Terrence's unhinged, threatening voicemail and Yvonne's tearful, defamatory Facebook video successfully terrified me into submission. They assume my wealth makes me soft, and that the threat of a fake public lawsuit was enough to make me surrender my empire. They are walking directly into a financial slaughterhouse, and they are absolutely convinced they are arriving for a feast. I turn back to my team. I instruct Arthur to print the final physical portfolios. I do not want digital screens tonight. I want heavy, undeniable paper. I want crisp, physical folders containing the original forged loan documents from 12 years ago, the deed of assignment for their second mortgage, and the active foreclosure notices. I want Connor's Ponzi scheme ledgers printed in high-definition color, showing exactly how much money he stole from the church elders. I want the physical weight of their destruction sitting right there on the dinner table. The afternoon passes in a state of hyper-focused anticipation. I leave my firm early to prepare. I do not dress like a daughter seeking forgiveness. I dress like a predator. I choose a tailored charcoal suit that fits like absolute armor paired with a stark white silk blouse. I pull my hair back into a sleek, severe style. I slip on the vintage Cartier watch I bought myself after closing my first $50 million acquisition. This is not a family dinner. This is a corporate liquidation. I arrive at the Capitol Grill a full hour before the reservation. The general manager greets me at the door with eager deference, leading me straight to the exclusive private dining room at the back of the restaurant. The room is immaculate. Heavy mahogany paneled walls, rich leather chairs, and crystal glasses gleaming under the dim ambient lighting. It smells of aged steak, expensive red wine, and old money. I instruct the waitstaff to keep the vintage Cabernet flowing the moment my guests arrive. I want them incredibly comfortable. I want them arrogant and relaxed. I take my seat at the absolute head of the long table. I place the thick black leather portfolios Arthur prepared directly in front of me, perfectly aligned with my silverware. I rest my hands on the table and wait. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy wooden doors swing open. They enter the room as if they have just conquered a nation. Terrence leads the pack, his chest puffed out, wearing a suit that looks entirely too tight across the shoulders. Yvonne is right behind him, carrying a new designer handbag that Connor undoubtedly bought her using stolen funds from the church elders. She looks around the luxurious private room with a smug, entitled expression, as if her sheer presence willed it into existence. Then comes Jasmine, clinging tightly to Connor's arm. She is wearing a fitted dress deliberately chosen to accentuate a pregnancy bump that does not actually exist. She rests her hand on her flat stomach, playing the role of the exhausted, expecting mother to absolute perfection. Connor struts in beside her, wearing a flashy velvet blazer and a grin so arrogant it makes my blood boil. He looks at me sitting at the head of the table and actually winks, as if we are conspirators in a game only he understands. None of them bother to say hello. None of them ask how I am doing. They simply take their seats, claiming the expensive leather chairs with greedy anticipation. Yvonne immediately flags down a waiter to demand a sparkling water, complaining loudly about the traffic. Terrence leans back in his chair and stares at me from the opposite end of the table, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. He thinks he broke me. He thinks his aggressive threats brought the ungrateful daughter to her knees. Connor reaches for a bread roll and points a butter knife directly at me. He casually mentions that he already brought the wire transfer routing numbers for his corporate account, so we can get the business out of the way before the appetizers arrive. He actually tells me that he is willing to forgive my disrespectful behavior in the lobby yesterday as long as the funds clear by tomorrow morning. I look at all four of them sitting at my table, drinking my wine and waiting for my money. I look at the people who stole my identity, ruined my 20s, cast me out into the street, and actively defrauded their own community to fund a lie. I smile a slow, terrifyingly calm smile. I tell them to enjoy the wine. I tell them to order absolutely anything they want from the menu because tonight is a night they will remember for the rest of their lives. I slide my hands over the black leather folders sitting in front of me. The trap is closed, the doors are shut. It is time to serve the main course. The camera slowly slides across the immaculate expanse of my walk-in closet, lingering on rows of designer silk and tailored wool. I reach out and pull a bespoke charcoal gray suit from the rack. It is not just clothing, it is absolute armor. I slip into the trousers and button the sharply structured blazer. The fabric is heavy and unforgiving, tailored to perfection, projecting an aura of total, undeniable authority. I pair it with a stark white silk blouse and step into a pair of black stiletto pumps that echo like a gavel striking wood against the hardwood floor. I stand before the floor-to-ceiling mirror and stare at my reflection. My hands move up to my hair, adjusting the thick, tightly coiled natural curls framing my face. For years, my mother Yvonne treated my natural hair like a moral failing. I vividly remember sitting between her knees as a child, wincing as she violently yanked a hot comb through my roots, muttering about how difficult and unruly I was. I remember the constant, relentless comparisons to Jasmine. Jasmine with her looser curl pattern. Jasmine with her lighter complexion. Jasmine who fit perfectly into the deeply ingrained colorist and classist ideals my parents worshipped. They gaslit me into believing that my darker skin and my natural features made me inherently less valuable. Yvonne used to buy skin-lightening creams and leave them casually on my bathroom counter. She would praise Jasmine's fine features to the church congregation while pointedly ignoring my academic trophies. Terrence would force me to stay in the kitchen during dinner parties because I did not reflect the polished upper-class aesthetic he was desperately trying to project to his peers. They convinced me that I was aggressive simply because I was ambitious. They called me difficult because I refused to be invisible. They spent my entire adolescence making me feel incredibly ugly and entirely inadequate. Yvonne would constantly tell me that I needed to soften my appearance and lower my voice if I ever wanted to secure a husband. They weaponized their own self-hatred against me, using it to justify throwing me out into the street with nothing but a trash bag. And then there was Connor. The memory of his smug face makes my jaw clench. My parents practically rolled out a red carpet the day Jasmine brought him home. They worshipped him instantly. He did not have to earn their respect. He did not have to prove his financial literacy or demonstrate a shred of actual integrity. He simply walked through their front door as a white man in a cheap off-the-rack suit, and they immediately handed him the keys to the kingdom. His mere existence represented the ultimate social prize for Terrence and Yvonne. They were so utterly desperate for proximity to whiteness and the illusion of elite status that they willfully suspended all critical thinking. They looked at a mediocre grifter spinning empty buzzwords about cryptocurrency and saw a savior. They looked at their own brilliant, hardworking black daughter and saw acceptable collateral. They forged my signature and destroyed my credit without a single ounce of hesitation, just to finance the delusions of a man who secretly laughed at their gullibility. I turn away from the mirror and walk out to the massive marble island in my kitchen. Two incredibly thick manila envelopes rest on the pristine surface. I reach out and place my hands flat against the heavy paper. The envelope on the left contains the irrefutable forensic evidence of the $200,000 commercial loan they fraudulently opened in my name 12 years ago. It holds the forged signatures, the bank routing numbers, and the federal wire transfers leading directly to Connor's first bankrupt shell company. The envelope on the right contains the catastrophic present. It holds the deeply toxic second mortgage Terrence secretly took out on his home. It holds the active foreclosure notices. It holds the complete digital ledger of Connor's illegal Ponzi scheme, proving he systematically drained the life savings of the elderly members of my parents' own church congregation. And most importantly, it holds the legal deed of assignment, proving that my private equity firm now owns every single piece of that debt. I think back to the text messages my mother and Connor sent just a few hours ago. Yvonne telling me it was about time I remembered my place. Connor telling me to have the money ready. They truly believe they hold the power. They think the mere threat of a baseless public lawsuit is enough to force me into terrified submission. Their arrogance is not just offensive, it is a fatal tactical error. They are so accustomed to bullying me into compliance that they failed to realize I am no longer the helpless 20-year-old girl crying in her car. I am a titan in the financial sector, and I dismantle hostile threats for a living. The heavy oak door of my penthouse chimes. I open it to find my lead attorney Marcus waiting in the private elevator lobby. He is dressed impeccably, holding a sleek leather briefcase and projecting the same cold, detached energy that makes him the most feared litigator in Atlanta. He does not offer a polite greeting. He simply looks at the two manila envelopes in my hands and gives a single sharp nod. He knows exactly what tonight represents. We are not going to a family reconciliation dinner. We are executing a hostile takeover of my parents' entire reality. I pick up the envelopes and step into the elevator. The ride down to the private garage is completely silent. We slide into the back of my waiting town car, and the driver merges seamlessly into the evening traffic. I look out the tinted window, watching the bright city lights blur past. I feel an overwhelming, profound sense of calm washing over me. The anxiety and the desperate need for parental validation that haunted my 20s are completely gone. They burned those feelings out of me the day they kicked me out and stole my identity. Tonight is the ultimate end of an era. The era of the scapegoat is officially over. The car pulls up to the valet stand at the Capitol Grill. The restaurant radiates warmth and luxury, the perfect setting for the trap I have set. Marcus steps out and opens my door. I step onto the pavement, clutching the manila envelopes tightly against my side. I know exactly what is waiting for me inside that private dining room. I know Yvonne is expecting me to hand over a massive check and apologize for setting boundaries. I know Connor is practically salivating over the thought of a $150,000 cash injection to keep his fraudulent empire from collapsing. They think they are walking into a feast funded by the daughter they broke. They have absolutely no idea they are walking into an execution. The waiter steps forward holding a bottle of vintage Bordeaux. Connor snaps his fingers at the young man and then gestures lazily in my direction. He actually tells the waiter to hand me the bottle. He leans back in his chair and announces to the table that his sister-in-law should do the honors of pouring the wine since she is finally learning how to serve her family properly. Jasmine lets out a high-pitched giggle, and Yvonne smiles in absolute approval. I do not move. I sit perfectly still in my tailored charcoal suit, staring across the table at Connor. This is the man they sacrificed me for. I look at his smug face, his perfectly styled hair, and his completely unearned arrogance. For my entire life, Terrence and Yvonne gaslit me into believing I was fundamentally inadequate. They made me feel ugly and less than because my thick, natural hair and dark skin did not fit their rigid, deeply internalized colorist ideals. They treated my existence as a social deficit that I needed to constantly apologize for through silent obedience. They demanded perfection from me, but rewarded me with nothing but harsh criticism. But Connor was entirely different. They worshipped Connor the exact second he walked into their home. He did not have to prove his intelligence, his work ethic, or his moral character. They handed him their absolute respect solely because he was a white man in a suit. He represented the class's proximity to elite status that they had spent decades desperately chasing. They were so blinded by their own self-hatred and their desire to assimilate into high society that they willingly offered up their own brilliant, hardworking black daughter as collateral to finance a mediocre grifter. They destroyed my credit, forged my signature, and threw me out into the street just to ensure this fraud could keep playing the role of a successful entrepreneur. And now, 12 years later, they are sitting at my table drinking my wine and treating me like the help. I do not reach for the bottle. I simply raise my hand and give the waiter a sharp, subtle nod. The young man understands the shift in the room immediately. He sets the expensive bottle down on the marble credenza, bows his head slightly, and quickly exits the private dining room. Jasmine lets out a heavy, dramatic sigh. She rubs her flat stomach, exaggerating a wince of pain. She complains that I am stalling and that her blood sugar is dropping dangerously low. She whines that I have kept them waiting long enough with my petty theatrical behavior and that I need to stop being so deeply inconsiderate of her pregnancy. Yvonne immediately leans over and pats Jasmine's hand, shooting me a venomous glare. She demands that I stop playing games with the health of her unborn grandchild. She tells me to stop trying to ruin their evening and just do what I came here to do. Terrence leans forward, placing his thick hands flat on the pristine white tablecloth. The distinguished veneer of the respected church elder vanishes entirely, revealing the raw, desperate greed underneath. He demands to know where the money is. He asks if I brought the certified check or if my lawyer is initiating the corporate wire transfer right now. He speaks to me with the harsh, commanding tone he used when I was a terrified teenager living under his roof. He states plainly that they are not here for a heartfelt conversation or a tearful apology. They are here to collect the $150,000 I owe Connor for the emotional and reputational distress I caused his business. He tells me that once the funds clear my accounts, they might consider allowing me to attend future family holidays. I look at Terrence. The absolute delusion is almost breathtaking. He is entirely convinced that his unhinged, aggressive voicemails broke me. He believes that Yvonne's defamatory Facebook video terrified me into submission. They think I am sitting at the head of this table because I am desperate to buy back their affection. They think my wealth makes me a soft, compliant target. They have absolutely no idea that the woman sitting across from them is not the daughter they discarded. The daughter they discarded died in a cheap motel room 12 years ago, buried under a mountain of their fraudulent debt. The woman sitting across from them is a predator. I slide my manicured fingers over the smooth surface of the first black leather folder. The room is silent, except for the soft clinking of ice in Yvonne's water glass. Marcus stands silently at my right shoulder, projecting the lethal stillness of a corporate executioner. He does not say a word, but his presence alone is a warning they are too arrogant to heed. I press a small silver button hidden on the wall panel directly next to my chair. The heavy mahogany doors swing entirely shut. The electronic lock engages with a sharp, undeniable click echoing loudly in the quiet room. Terrence frowns, his eyes darting toward the locked door. Connor stops smirking, his hand freezing halfway to his water glass. The sudden shift in the atmosphere is palpable. The temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. I look directly into Connor's eyes and then shift my cold gaze to Terrence. I smile a razor-sharp, completely humorless smile. I tell them there will be no wire transfer today. There will be no apology. And there will certainly be no check. I flip open the heavy cover of the first leather portfolio, revealing the pristine legal documents inside. I lean forward, resting my arms on the table. Before we order the Wagyu, I say softly, "We have some paperwork to go over." I slide the first thick manila envelope across the polished mahogany table. It glides with a heavy, satisfying sound, stopping exactly an inch from Terrence's water glass. Yvonne lets out a sharp, exasperated sigh. She rolls her eyes so hard I can practically hear the disdain echoing in the quiet room. She tells me to stop being so incredibly dramatic. She asks if this is some sort of ridiculous non-disclosure agreement I want them to sign before handing over the money. She snaps at me to just write the check so they can eat, complaining that Jasmine needs her Wagyu beef and my legal games are completely exhausting. She crosses her arms, adjusting her counterfeit designer watch, and glares at me with absolute contempt. Terrence ignores her. He glares at me, but reaches for the envelope. He tears the flap open, his thick fingers pulling out the stack of heavily stamped legal documents. He flips to the first page. I watch his eyes scan the top of the paper. I watch his pupils dilate. The deep, arrogant flush in his cheeks instantly vanishes, replaced by a sickly, chalky pallor. He stops breathing. He flips to the second page, his hands beginning to tremble so violently that the thick parchment paper rattles against the table. He looks like a man who has just been told his parachute is empty while plummeting toward the earth. Connor leans over, annoyed, trying to see what has silenced his father-in-law. "What is it, T?" he asks, his tone dripping with impatience. "Just sign the thing so she can pay us. We have reservations at the club at 9. I lean back in my chair and fold my hands in my lap. I speak with perfect, unhurried articulation. I tell Terrence to read it out loud. He cannot speak. His mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. A bead of cold sweat rolls down the side of his face. Since my father seems to have lost his voice, I say, projecting my words clearly across the room, I will summarize it for the table. I look directly at Yvonne. "You forged my signature 12 years ago. You stole my identity to take out a $200,000 commercial loan to fund Connor's first failed business venture. You destroyed my credit, ruined my 20s, and threw me out of your house when the collection agencies started calling. Yvonne scoffs, trying to interrupt, calling it ancient history and telling me to get over it. I raise a single finger, silencing her instantly. That was the past, I say coldly. Let us talk about the present. Connor needed more money for his current real estate scheme. He convinced you to take out a massive second mortgage on your house. The house where I grew up. The house where you packed my belongings in trash bags. Connor's smug grin finally starts to slip. He shifts in his chair, his eyes darting toward the locked mahogany doors. Connor defaulted on that loan 6 months ago. I continue, my voice slicing through the heavy silence of the room. The original private lender was preparing to seize the asset. Foreclosure was imminent. So I stepped in. I point to the top corner of the document in Terrence's trembling hands. Look at the logo at the top of that foreclosure notice. Look at the name of the primary lien holder. Terrence stares at my corporate letterhead. He finally croaks out my company's name, his voice barely a whisper. I bought your distressed debt for pennies on the dollar. I state my words, hitting them like physical blows. I own the promissory notes. I own the second mortgage. I bought the debt. I am your landlord now, and you are officially 30 days past due on rent. The silence that follows is absolute. It is the sound of an entire false reality shattering into dust. The sterile corporate air of the boardroom they expected is gone, replaced by the suffocating weight of total financial ruin. Jasmine looks at Connor, her face twisting in confusion. "Connor, what is she talking about?" she asks, her voice trembling. "You said her business was struggling. You said she owed us money. You said we were getting a check tonight." Connor tries to bluster his way out. The sheer entitlement ingrained in his DNA takes over. He stands up, slamming his hands on the table, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. He shouts that this is illegal. He screams that I cannot just buy private debt without their consent, and that he will sue me for corporate espionage. He demands that Marcus unlock the doors and let them leave immediately. Marcus steps forward, his voice a low, lethal baritone. He does not flinch. He recites the exact corporate codes and statutes, proving the acquisition was entirely legal, finalized, and ironclad. He reminds Connor that raising his voice to a principal partner will result in immediate physical removal by the restaurant's private security. I look at Connor with pure, unadulterated disgust. I tell him to sit down and close his mouth. He is a fraud. He has always been a fraud. He played my parents perfectly, feeding their desperate need for elite validation, but he cannot play me. I remind him that I run a multinational private equity firm while he runs a shell game out of a leased strip mall office. Yvonne reaches over and snatches the papers from Terrence's limp hands. She reads them, her eyes darting frantically across the legal jargon. "This is a trick," she stammers, her voice rising in panic. "Terrence, tell her this is a trick. She does not have this kind of money. She works in a small office. She is just trying to scare us." "I have more money than God, Mother," I say evenly. "I bought your entire existence with the loose capital sitting in one of my minor holding accounts." I stare at my mother, watching her manicured fingers crumple the edges of the foreclosure notice. For decades, Yvonne and Terrence treated my ambition as a character flaw. They told me my natural curls were unprofessional. They bought skin-lightening creams and left them on my bathroom counter, a silent, toxic reminder that I would never be the right kind of daughter for their social circles. Jasmine, with her looser curls and lighter complexion, was paraded around the country club like a trophy. Connor was handed the keys to their financial security because his whiteness provided the exact aesthetic they craved. They were willing to bankrupt themselves and actively destroy my future just to maintain proximity to a man who secretly laughed at their gullibility. They threw me away because I refused to shrink myself to fit their self-hating narrative. They sacrificed their own blood at the altar of high society assimilation. And now the very daughter they deemed too dark, too aggressive, and too unruly is sitting at the head of the table holding the physical deed to their lives. Now that same ambition they despised has purchased the ground beneath their feet. The irony is beautifully terrifyingly absolute. Tonight is the end of an era. The golden child and her fraudulent husband have been exposed, and the parents who enabled them are currently sitting in property they no longer own. I place my hand on the second manila envelope resting on the table. The first envelope was just the appetizer. I slide the second manila envelope straight down the center of the table. It stops inches from Connor's clenched fists. He glares at the thick package as if it is a live explosive. The arrogant bluster he used to verbally decimate my father a moment ago is rapidly evaporating. He realizes that the ground beneath his feet is not just crumbling, it is completely gone. He reaches out and snatches the envelope from the table, trying desperately to project a tough, unaffected exterior. He scoffs loudly, waving the unopened package in the air. "What is this, a lawsuit?" Connor sneers, trying to mimic the detached confidence of the billionaires he so desperately pretends to be. He leans back and crosses his arms, projecting a false sense of absolute boredom. "You really think you can scare me with some civil litigation, Kiara? My lawyers will absolutely crush you in court. We will tie you up in discovery for the next 10 years. I look at him and let out a single short laugh. The sound is completely devoid of warmth. It echoes off the mahogany walls, sharp and precise. "No, Connor," I say, my voice dropping to a calm, deadly volume. "That is not a civil lawsuit. That is a courtesy copy of a federal indictment." The color drains out of Connor's face so quickly, he looks like a corpse. His hands drop to the table. "Ew. My private equity firm does not just buy debt." I continue leaning forward and clasping my hands together. "We perform rigorous, uncompromising due diligence. When my forensic accounting team audited your shell companies to verify the second mortgage on my parents' home, they found the rest of your digital ledger. They found the hidden offshore cryptocurrency wallets. They found the unrecorded wire transfers. They tracked every single penny you systematically drained from the life savings of the elderly members of Terrence and Yvonne's church." Terrence lets out a strangled gasp. He grabs the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. His position as a respected elder in that church was his entire identity. It was the absolute pinnacle of the social status he craved. He had personally vouched for Connor. He had introduced this parasite to widows and retirees, framing Connor's fraudulent investment fund as a divine financial opportunity. "You did not just steal from my parents, Connor," I say, watching his eyes dart frantically around the locked room. "You stole from 40 different elderly people in my dad's church congregation, and my lead forensic accountant handed your entire unredacted ledger over to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Bureau of Investigation precisely at 8 o'clock this morning." Connor rips the envelope open, his hands shaking so violently that he tears the thick paper. He pulls out the documents. There are no legal demands for repayment. There are no settlement offers. There are only heavily stamped copies of federal subpoenas, SEC filing numbers, and printed transaction logs showing the exact dates and times he moved stolen retirement funds into his private accounts. It is over. The illusion of his success, the carefully curated image of the brilliant white savior entrepreneur, has been completely eradicated. He is staring at a document that guarantees he will spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. Yvonne covers her mouth with both hands, letting out a low, guttural moan. The realization of her absolute social destruction is hitting her in real time. She will never be able to show her face in that church again. The people she gossiped with, the women she tried to impress, the community she valued over her own daughter, they have all been financially ruined by the son-in-law she paraded around like a prize. She will be the ultimate outcast. Her precious proximity to whiteness and wealth has resulted in utter catastrophic disgrace. Jasmine is hyperventilating. She grabs Connor's arm, shaking him violently, demanding that he tell her this is a lie. She begs him to explain it, to tell her that the documents are fake and that Kiara is just being a jealous, vindictive sister. Connor does not even look at her. He shoves her hands away, his eyes completely glazed over with panic. He is a cornered rat trapped in a room with the predator who engineered his demise. He jumps out of his chair, knocking it over completely. He looks wildly at Marcus, who is standing perfectly still by the mahogany doors. Connor demands that Marcus open the door immediately. He orders my attorney to step aside, acting as though he still holds a shred of authority in this room. Marcus simply adjusts the cuffs of his bespoke suit and looks at Connor with a blank, terrifying expression. He does not move a single inch. "You cannot do this!" Connor screams, turning back to me, his voice cracking with pure terror. "You cannot just lock me in here and hand my files to the feds. I am your family. You owe us." "I do not owe you anything, Connor," I state coldly. "I owed you a reckoning, and I have delivered it in full. I did not come here tonight to negotiate a repayment plan. I did not come here to listen to your excuses or watch my parents beg for mercy. I came here to watch the exact moment the consequences of your actions finally caught up to you." The room falls dead silent. Jasmine's sobbing reduces to quiet, ragged gasps. Terrence is staring at the table completely broken. Yvonne is clutching her chest, unable to breathe. Connor stands in the center of the room, clutching the federal indictment, trembling like a leaf. Then, cutting through the heavy, suffocating silence of the private dining room, a sound begins to echo from the street outside. It starts as a faint, distant wail. Connor freezes his head, snapping toward the thick-tinted windows overlooking the city street. The sound grows louder. It is sharp, piercing, and undeniable. It is the sound of approaching sirens. I watch Connor's eyes widen in absolute horror as the wailing grows closer and closer, echoing off the surrounding high-rise buildings. The flashing red and blue lights begin to reflect off the tinted glass of the restaurant windows, bathing Connor's terrified face in a harsh, rhythmic glow. The sirens are pulling up directly outside the front doors of the Capitol Grill. I smile, picking up my glass of vintage Bordeaux. The main course has finally arrived. The red and blue strobe lights paint the walls of the private dining room in frantic, rhythmic colors, bleeding through the tinted glass and illuminating the absolute terror on Connor's face. The reality of those sirens paralyzes everyone at the table. Terrence sits frozen, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. Yvonne is clutching her chest, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the social destruction she fears more than death itself comes pulling up to the front doors of the restaurant. Connor scrambles backward, his chair tipping over and crashing onto the hardwood floor. He frantically looks around the room, searching for an exit that does not exist. He mutters to himself, his voice high and thin, saying he needs to call his lawyer. He needs to make a deal. He needs to get out of here. But Marcus simply crosses his arms and stands squarely in front of the locked mahogany doors, an immovable physical barrier between Connor and his freedom. I take a slow, appreciative sip of my wine, letting the exquisite vintage wash over my tongue. I watch the man who ruined my credit and stole my parents' home reduce himself to a pathetic, whimpering mess. But the most spectacular fracture happens right next to him. Jasmine watches her husband crumble. She looks at the man she paraded around like the ultimate prize, the man who is supposed to guarantee her entry into elite society. The illusion evaporates in a matter of seconds. She realizes instantly that she is not a wealthy socialite married to a brilliant entrepreneur. She is the pregnant wife of a federally indicted felon. She is standing in an expensive restaurant she can no longer afford, with parents who no longer have a home to take her back to. Her entire identity, her superiority, her immense unearned pride vanishes. Jasmine does not reach out to comfort her panicking husband. She does not stand by his side. The sheer opportunistic greed that defines her kicks in immediately. She turns her back on Connor completely. She drops to the floor. Her expensive silk dress pools around her knees as she scrambles across the hardwood toward my chair. She moves with a frantic, desperate energy, practically crawling until she collapses right at my feet. She reaches out and grabs my hand, her perfectly manicured fingernails digging into my skin. Her hair is messy, her face is wet with tears, and her meticulously crafted aesthetic is completely destroyed. "Kiara, please!" she begs, her voice cracking, breaking into a high-pitched wail. "I had no idea. I swear to God I did not know what he was doing. You have to believe me. You have to help me. I am your sister." She looks back at Connor with pure, undisguised venom. "I will leave him," She cries out the betrayal, instantaneous and absolute. I will file for divorce tomorrow morning. I will testify against him if they want me to. Just do not leave me here with them. Let me come with you, Kiara. Let me come live with you in the penthouse. We can be a family again. You and me and the baby. I can help you run your firm. I can be your assistant. Just please, please take me with you. She is weaponizing her pregnancy. She is playing the sister card she has ignored for 12 years. She expects me to swoop in and rescue her because she has spent her entire life being rescued. She expects the world to magically cushion her fall because she is the golden child. I look down at her grasping fingers staining my skin with her sweat and tears. I do not feel a single ounce of pity. I feel nothing but a cold, clinical sense of closure. I deliberately pull my hand out of her grip. I step back so she is left kneeling on the empty floor, grasping at the air. "You made your bed, Jasmine," I say, my voice steady and completely devoid of warmth. "Just 3 weeks ago, you stood in the lobby of my corporate office and called me a bitter, ugly dropout. You told me I was jealous of your perfect life. You shoved that fraudulent diamond ring in my face and told me I would die alone because I refused to soften myself for a man. You spent your entire life feeding off my misery." Jasmine shakes her head wildly, sobbing and reaching for me again, but I take another step back. "You wanted to be the golden child." I continue my words, slicing through her hysterical crying. "You soaked up their praise while they tore me down. You watched them lock me out of the house with my belongings in a trash bag, and you smiled. You built your entire fragile identity on being better than me. Well, this is the cost of that crown. You tied your wagon to a parasite simply because he looked the part, and you happily let our parents finance your delusion. Then take the golden child's consequences. My penthouse is strictly for people who do not backstab me." Terrence and Yvonne watch their precious favorite daughter begging on the floor. It shatters whatever tiny fragment of pride they had left. Yvonne reaches out a trembling hand toward Jasmine, calling her name softly, but Jasmine slaps her mother's hand away. She screams at Yvonne, blaming her for pushing her to marry a white man, just for the status, blaming her for everything. The family is cannibalizing itself right in front of me, tearing each other apart the second the money and the prestige are stripped away. Heavy, determined footsteps echo in the hallway outside the private room. Marcus steps aside and presses the wall panel. The electronic lock disengages, and the heavy mahogany doors swing open. 4 federal agents wearing tactical windbreakers, clearly marked with FBI yellow lettering, step into the room, followed by 2 uniformed city police officers. The restaurant manager hovers nervously in the background, looking absolutely horrified by the scene. The lead agent scans the room, his hand resting near his utility belt. He locks eyes with Connor, who is backed against the far wall. The agent calls out Connor's full legal name, stating that he is under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and violating the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Connor tries to bolt for the kitchen entrance, but an officer grabs him instantly. The officer spins Connor around and slams his chest against the marble credenza, knocking the expensive wine bottle to the floor where it shatters. The sharp, metallic, ratcheting sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoes through the room, cutting through Jasmine's wailing. The agent recites the Miranda rights as they drag Connor toward the door. Connor is sobbing now, begging Terrence to call a lawyer, begging Jasmine to help him. But Terrence just stares blankly at the wall, a completely hollowed-out shell of a man. Jasmine stays on the floor, weeping into her hands, refusing to even look at her husband as he is hauled away in disgrace. I stand up and smooth out the front of my charcoal blazer. I pick up my leather portfolio and hand it to Marcus, who gives me a single respectful nod. I look at my parents and my sister one last time. They are sitting in the ruins of their own making, stripped of their wealth, their home, their status, and their illusions. I turn my back on them and walk out the door, stepping past the shattered glass and into the cool evening air. I pause on the pristine pavement outside the Capitol Grill, breathing in the crisp night air. The cold wind bites against my heated skin, a sharp contrast to the suffocating panic I just left behind in that private dining room. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling front windows of the restaurant, I have a perfect, unobstructed view of the chaos unfolding inside. I watch as the heavy mahogany doors of the private room are violently pushed open. Two more federal agents step inside, cutting off any chance of escape. Connor does not go quietly. The second the agents move toward him, he panics. He tries to run, lunging for the back exit of the dining room, but he is immediately tackled. An agent takes him down hard, sending a tray of crystal glasses crashing to the floor. Connor is slammed against the polished wood paneling, and I watch as his hands are wrenched behind his back and handcuffed. The agents haul him to his feet and begin to drag him through the main dining area. Diners at the expensive front window tables freeze their forks suspended in midair. Wealthy patrons in tailored suits and cocktail dresses turn their heads in absolute shock. The quiet hum of jazz and polite conversation is replaced by the harsh reality of a federal takedown. Cell phones are already being raised. The entire restaurant watches in stunned silence as the so-called successful entrepreneur is dragged out in cuffs. As they force him through the main lobby and out the front doors onto the street where I am standing, Connor is screaming obscenities. His voice is completely stripped of its usual polished corporate charm, replaced by raw, venomous panic. He thrashes against the heavy steel handcuffs and twists his head back toward Terrence and Jasmine, who have stumbled out onto the sidewalk behind him. He aims his fury directly at them, blaming Jasmine, blaming Terrence, blaming everyone but himself. He abandons his progressive ally persona in a fraction of a second. "You did this to me," Connor shrieks, his face purple with rage. "You handed me that money. You practically begged me to take it. You stupid, gullible old man." Terrence stands frozen on the pavement, his mouth hanging open, unable to process the sheer audacity of the disrespect. Connor does not stop. He leans forward, fighting the agents who are pulling him toward the waiting black SUV. "I deserve that money," he yells, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated entitlement. "You people do not know how to build wealth anyway. You just like playing dress-up. You buy designer bags and lease luxury cars to pretend you are rich, but you are functionally broke. You are pathetic. I took the money because it was just sitting there going to waste on a bunch of desperate social climbers." He turns his hateful, wild gaze on Jasmine, who is standing paralyzed, clutching her pregnant stomach. He laughs, a manic, terrifying sound that echoes down the busy avenue. He tells her she is nothing. He screams that he never loved her, that she was just a convenient prop, a pathetic social climbing accessory who financed his lifestyle. He screams that they ruined his brilliant empire, that he was a visionary, and they dragged him down. He takes zero accountability, deflecting every single ounce of his criminal guilt onto the very people who destroyed their own daughter to prop him up. The federal agents have had enough. They muscle him forward forcefully, shoving his head down and slamming him into the back of the waiting SUV. The heavy door shuts, cutting off his unhinged screaming mid-sentence. Yvonne stumbles out of the restaurant doors just in time to see the vehicle being locked. She leans heavily against the brick facade, her eyes wide with a terror that borders on madness. Her legs give out completely. She collapses onto the hard concrete pavement, her expensive silk dress pooling in the street dirt. She holds her head, pulling at her perfectly styled hair, ruining the expensive updo, and lets out a long, agonizing wail. It is a sound of pure, absolute devastation. It cuts through the ambient noise of the city traffic and the low murmurs of the shocked restaurant patrons gathering at the glass. She is weeping uncontrollably, hitting her fists against the pavement. The reality is finally crushing her. The white son-in-law she worshipped, the man she believed would elevate their family status, the man she literally sacrificed her own black daughter for, has just been dragged away in handcuffs like a common criminal. He is a fraud who ruined them. He stole their home, their dignity, and their community standing. He bankrupted them and despised them while doing it. The elite social circles she so desperately coveted are currently sitting in the main dining room watching her complete and utter humiliation. There is no coming back from this. She is ruined. Terrence stands beside her looking like a hollowed-out shell. The arrogant patriarch who ruled his household with an iron fist has evaporated. He does not reach down to help his wife. He does not move to comfort Jasmine, who has collapsed against the valet stand, sobbing hysterically into her hands. He just stares at the black SUV as it pulls away from the curb, merging into the evening traffic and taking his entire legacy with it. He realizes that he traded his brilliant, loyal daughter for a grifter who always viewed him as inferior. I stand a few feet away, completely untouched by their destruction. Marcus steps up beside me, holding my leather portfolio. The sleek black town car pulls up to the curb, gliding silently to a stop in front of us, completely ignoring the chaotic scene playing out by the valet. The driver steps out and opens the rear door, holding it respectfully. I look at my family one last time. I see the exact people who threw me out into the street 12 years ago with nothing but a trash bag. I see the parents who told me I was ugly, loud, and unlovable. I see the sister who mocked my ambition and flaunted her fraudulent wealth. They are broken, bankrupt, and publicly disgraced by the very system they tried to cheat. I do not feel a shred of pity. I do not feel the familiar childhood urge to fix their mistakes or earn their love. I feel absolutely nothing. The debt has been paid in full. I step into the back of the town car. Marcus slides in beside me, and the heavy door closes with a solid, comforting thud, shutting out the sound of Yvonne's wailing. The car pulls away from the curb, leaving them behind on the cold pavement. The era of the scapegoat is officially over. The Titan has won. The car barely moves 2 feet from the curb before Terrence finally snaps out of his catatonic shock. The reality of his complete financial and social annihilation overrides his pride. He lunges directly into the street and slams both of his hands flat against the hood of the moving town car. My driver hits the brakes hard, sending a harsh screech of tires echoing down the busy avenue. Marcus immediately reaches inside his jacket, pulling his radio to call for the private security detail trailing us, but I raise my hand to stop him. I want to see this. I press the button on the armrest, and the heavy tinted window glides down, letting the freezing night air rush into the quiet cabin. Terrence practically tears the door handle off, trying to force his way inside, but the automatic locks are securely engaged. He presses his face near the open window. His chest is heaving, his expensive suit jacket is wrinkled, and the veins in his neck are bulging. He looks wildly back at the sidewalk where Jasmine is still sobbing uncontrollably on the cold concrete, and Yvonne is hyperventilating against the brick wall of the restaurant. The wealthy patrons of the Capitol Grill are still pressed against the glass, watching his entire legacy burn to the ground. He turns his desperate, wild eyes back to me. He tries to straighten his posture, trying to summon the booming, authoritative voice he used to terrorize me throughout my entire childhood. He points a trembling finger at my face, refusing to accept that his absolute power over me evaporated years ago. "You stop this right now," he demands, his voice cracking with raw panic. "You call your people and you stop that foreclosure immediately. You have to forgive the debt, Kiara. I am your father. The Bible says, honor thy mother and father." I sit back against the plush leather seat, completely unfazed by his booming voice. I do not flinch. I do not look away. I look at the man who used his religion as a weapon to beat me into submission for 18 years. I look at the man who used his position in the church to feed vulnerable elderly people directly into the jaws of a corporate predator. The Bible also says, "Thou shalt not steal, Dad." I reply, my voice lethally calm and echoing clearly in the cold night air. "You stole my credit, my youth, and my peace of mind. You do not get to invoke God only when the devil comes to collect." Terrence physically recoils as if I have struck him across the face with a lead pipe. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The absolute finality of my words shatters the fragile illusion of authority he was trying so desperately to cling to. He stares at me, realizing that his biblical threats hold absolutely no power over a woman who built her own salvation from scratch. Yvonne suddenly realizes that Terrence is failing. She scrambles up from the pavement, leaving her golden child crying in a heap on the floor. Yvonne stumbles toward the car, her high heels catching on the uneven asphalt. She grabs Terrence by the arm, pushing him aside with surprising force so she can get to my window. Her perfect makeup is streaked with thick black mascara. The expensive pearls around her neck are twisted, and her immaculate hair is a mess. Kiara. Please, Yvonne sobs, grabbing the edge of the open car window with both hands. You cannot do this to us. Think about the church. Think about our community standing. How can I ever show my face at the country club again? Everyone will know that Connor stole their money. They will blame us because we brought him to them. They will take everything we have left. Just give us the house back, Kiara. Give us the house so we have somewhere to hide. You are a billionaire now. You do not need that property. Please just be the bigger person. I stare at the woman who gave birth to me. I look at the woman who watched Terrence forge my signature on financial documents, who watched them saddle me with crippling debt, who watched them throw me out into the street with my clothes stuffed into a garbage bag. She did not shed a single tear for me then. She is only crying now because her elite social status has been permanently incinerated. I do not need the house, Yvonne. I say, addressing her by her first name for the first time in my entire life. But you do not deserve it. You stood by and watched Connor bleed your friends dry because you liked the expensive dinners and the exclusive invitations he bought with their stolen money. You sold your own soul for proximity to a white con artist. You wanted the prestige of being associated with him. Now you get to share the absolute disgrace of his crimes. When the FBI releases that ledger tomorrow morning, every single person you go to church with will know exactly how their retirement funds paid for your designer handbags. Yvonne lets out a high-pitched shriek of genuine horror. She covers her face with her hands, sobbing so violently she begins to choke on her own breath. She knows I am right. There is no coming back from this. The people she stepped on to climb the social ladder will tear her to shreds the moment the sun comes up. Terrence grabs the window frame again, his eyes wild with a mixture of terror and lingering arrogance. You cannot just leave us here, he yells, spittle flying from his lips. We are your blood. We are your family. You owe us respect. I demand that you unlock this door and let us in right now. I lean forward until I am inches from his face. The absolute coldness in my eyes makes him freeze mid-sentence. You are not my family, I whisper, my voice dropping to a terrifying absolute calm. You are just the people who provided the biological material necessary for my existence. My family consists of the people who stood by me when I was sleeping in a broken-down car. My family consists of the people who helped me build an empire while you were busy financing a criminal. You placed all your bets on Connor and Jasmine. You chose your golden child. Now you can sit on the pavement and comfort her while her husband goes to federal prison. Terrence stares at me, his hand slowly sliding off the cold metal of the car door. The fight is completely gone. The arrogant, untouchable patriarch is dead. He is just a broke, terrified old man standing in the middle of the street. I press the button on the armrest. The heavy, tinted window glides up smoothly, cutting off the sound of Yvonne's weeping and Jasmine's endless wailing on the sidewalk. I look straight ahead. Drive, I tell the chauffeur. The town car accelerates smoothly, merging into the flow of city traffic. I do not look back through the rear window. I do not need to. The past is dead and I have an empire to run. The town car ride back to my penthouse was completely silent. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted windows, feeling a profound sense of absolute closure. I slept better that night than I had in over a decade. But the acquisition of my parents is not technically complete until the ink dries on the final contracts. Less than 12 hours after Connor was thrown into the back of a federal vehicle, I am standing in the grand foyer of the house my parents value more than my own life. The morning sun is streaming through the massive arched windows, illuminating the expensive artwork and the pristine hardwood floors. The house is deadly quiet. Jasmine is not here. She is likely hiding in her own crumbling mansion, waiting for the FBI to freeze her bank accounts and seize her assets. Terrence and Yvonne are sitting close together on the expensive white linen sofas in the sunken living room. They look like they have aged 20 years overnight. Terrence is wearing a wrinkled polo shirt, staring blankly at the unlit fireplace. Yvonne has not bothered to put on makeup. Her face is puffy, and her hands tremble as she clutches a cold cup of coffee. They look small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. Marcus stands silently by the front door holding a thick leather folder. I sit in the single leather accent chair directly opposite the sofa. I let the silence stretch for several long minutes, allowing them to marinate in the absolute uncertainty of their immediate future. I watch the anxiety slowly eat away at their remaining composure. I stand up. I adjust the lapels of my tailored suit jacket, moving with slow, deliberate precision. I look down at the two people who were supposed to protect me, the two people who actively fed me to the wolves to maintain their suburban illusion. I am not going to evict you. I state, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. I am not going to call the county sheriff to forcibly remove your belongings and throw you out onto the street. Terrence lets out a ragged, shuddering breath. His shoulders drop a fraction of an inch, and a pathetic glimmer of relief crosses his face. He actually believes for a split second that family loyalty has won, that I am going to save him from his own spectacular failure. He leans forward, opening his mouth to thank me, to offer some hollow platitude about a father's love. I immediately crush it. However, I continue, my tone shifting into pure corporate detachment. You no longer own this home. The equity, the legacy, and the prestige you cared about so deeply are gone. Today, you will sign the deed over to me entirely and irrevocably. I will own every single brick of this property. Yvonne gasps, her hand flying to her throat. Terrence stiffens, his brief relief evaporating instantly. You will become my tenants, I say, pacing slowly across the expensive rug. You will pay me rent every single month on the first of the month without fail. And you will pay the exact current market rate for this zip code, not a penny less. There will be no family discounts, and there will be no grace periods. Terrence shakes his head wildly. Kiara, we cannot afford market rate rent. He stammers, his voice weak and raspy. Connor drained all our liquid assets. We have nothing left. You cannot possibly expect us to pay that kind of money. I hold up a single hand, silencing him instantly. I do not care how you find the money, Terrence. Get a second job. Sell the luxury cars sitting in the driveway. Pawn the expensive jewelry Yvonne is so fond of wearing. That is not my problem. I am laying out the absolute non-negotiable conditions of this arrangement. I step closer to the sofa, forcing them to look up at me. If you miss a single payment by even 1 minute, I will file eviction papers immediately. If you ever speak my name in your mouths to anyone in your church community again, I will evict you. If you ever try to contact me outside of official landlord and tenant correspondence, I will evict you. Yvonne is weeping now, quiet, pathetic tears streaming down her face. But I am not finished. I signal to Marcus, who steps forward and hands me the thick leather folder. I drop it onto the glass coffee table with a heavy thud, but that is not all I say, tapping the cover of the folder. Inside this file is the complete unredacted documentation of the identity theft you committed 12 years ago, Terrence. It contains the forged signatures on the credit applications, the fraudulent loan documents, and the bank records, showing exactly how you stole my identity to finance your lifestyle. It contains the proof of how you completely ruined my credit and nearly destroyed my early 20s. Terrence goes completely rigid. All the color drains from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. My legal team has compiled a bulletproof case, I whisper, leaning down until I am eye level with him. If you violate my terms, I will not just evict you. I will hand this file directly to the district attorney, and I will press full criminal charges for identity theft and wire fraud. You will spend your remaining years in a federal facility right down the hall from your precious son-in-law. Yvonne breaks down completely. She clutches her chest, rocking back and forth on the sofa. She wails loudly, accusing me of being heartless and cruel. She cries out that this is their family home, that they are my parents, and that I am a monster. You are treating us like strangers. Yvonne cries out, her voice thick with absolute despair. We are your blood, Kiara. How can you do this? You are treating us like strangers. I look at her without a single trace of emotion. My expression is a mask of pure cold marble. No, Mom. I say, my voice perfectly level. I am treating you like a business transaction. It is exactly what you taught me to do. Marcus steps out of the shadows of the grand foyer. He moves with the silent efficiency of a corporate executioner. He opens the heavy leather portfolio and begins placing the documents on the glass coffee table directly in front of my parents. The crisp sound of thick parchment echoes loudly in the cavernous living room. He separates the paperwork into 3 distinct piles. The first is the warranty deed transferring absolute ownership of the estate into the name of my holding company. The second is a draconian lease agreement outlining their market rate rent, the exorbitant late fees, and the immediate eviction clauses. The third is a sworn legal affidavit fully detailing the identity theft and wire fraud Terrence committed against me 12 years ago. It is completely filled out, awaiting only his signature and Marcus's notary stamp. Marcus retrieves a heavy silver pen from the inside pocket of his suit jacket and places it precisely in the center of the glass table. Terrence stares at the pen as if it is a loaded weapon. His breathing is shallow and erratic. He slowly raises his head and looks around the immaculate living room. He looks at the custom vaulted ceilings, the imported Italian marble fireplace, and the massive oil portrait of our supposedly perfect family hanging above the mantel. For his entire life, this house was his castle. It was the ultimate physical proof of his superiority and his divine favor. Now it is merely the collateral for his survival. His eyes drop back to the papers. He looks at his hands, the same hands that proudly shook Connor's hand at the country club. The same hands that packed my clothes into a garbage bag and locked the front door behind me. Those hands are now trembling violently. He realizes with absolute clarity that his golden child is completely ruined. His prized, brilliant son-in-law is currently sitting in a federal interrogation room facing decades in prison. His own wealth, his pristine credit, and his untouchable reputation have evaporated overnight. He reaches out and picks up the silver pen. His fingers wrap around the cool metal. He leans over the glass table, his shoulders shaking. A single tear falls from his eye and lands directly on the signature line of the warranty deed, smudging the black ink of his printed name. He swallows hard, a pathetic broken sound, and drags the pen across the paper. He signs away his kingdom. He signs the lease. He signs the confession. When he is finished, he drops the pen onto the glass and buries his face in his hands. He does not say a single word. He is entirely hollowed out. Yvonne does not hesitate. She snatches the pen with frantic, jerky movements. She cannot even bring herself to look in my direction. The suffocating shame of becoming a tenant to the daughter she relentlessly abused is too much for her fragile ego to bear. Her hand moves frantically across the pages, scratching her signature next to her husband's. She signs the deed and the lease, finalizing her own submission. She pushes the papers back toward Marcus and pulls her knees up to her chest, staring blankly at the floor. Just as Marcus begins gathering the documents, the heavy oak front door pushes open. Jasmine stumbles into the foyer. She must have taken a taxi from the restaurant after the federal agents drove away. Her appearance is shocking. The woman who obsessed over projecting flawless elite wealth looks like a complete disaster. Her expensive silk dress is stained and wrinkled. Her perfect blowout is tangled and matted. Her mascara has run down her cheeks in thick, dark tracks. She looks wildly around the room, her panicked eyes darting from Terrence's hunched figure to Yvonne's catatonic state. Then she sees Marcus sliding the property deeds into the leather portfolio. She sees me standing over them, adjusting my tailored suit jacket with absolute calm. The horrifying reality of the situation crashes down on her. She came running back to the safety of her parents' wealth, only to discover that I just bought it out from under them. There is no safety net left. There is no trust fund to raid. Jasmine lets out a desperate, choked sob and rushes toward me. She stops just inches away from the glass table, her hands wringing together. The arrogant, condescending sister who mocked my cheap clothes and paraded her stolen designer bags in my face is completely gone. "Kiara, you have to help me!" Jasmine begs, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Connor lied to me. He lied to all of us. I had no idea what he was doing with those funds. I am a victim in this too. The FBI froze our personal accounts. They locked the doors to the mansion. I have absolutely nothing. You are a billionaire, Kiara. You have more money than you could ever spend." She falls to her knees, clutching the edge of the glass table, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "I need a shark, Kiara," she pleads. "I need a top-tier defense attorney, and I need the best divorce lawyer in the city. I have to divorce Connor immediately before they try to tie me to his fraud. You have to give me a loan. Just write me a check. I am your sister. You cannot just leave me with nothing to fight a federal investigation. I look down at her. I look at the woman who smiled while her husband called me functionally broke. I look at the woman who happily financed her luxury lifestyle with the stolen life savings of elderly church members. She is not a victim. She is a parasite who finally ran out of hosts to drain. I reach into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. Jasmine watches my hand with breathless anticipation, expecting me to pull out a checkbook, expecting me to fall back into my childhood role of fixing her messes. Instead, I pull out a plain white card. I drop it onto the glass table. It slides smoothly, stopping right between her trembling hands. Jasmine looks down at it, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What is this?" she asks, her voice trembling. "That is the direct line to the county legal aid clinic," I reply, my voice dropping to a freezing clinical tone. "They provide public defenders for accomplices facing federal indictment. I suggest you call them first thing in the morning. They have a very long wait list." Jasmine stares at the card as if it is covered in poison. A fresh wave of absolute despair washes over her face. She looks up at me, opening her mouth to scream, to beg, to hurl insults, but I do not give her the chance. I turn my back on my weeping sister, my broken mother, and my defeated father. I walk across the hardwood floor, my heels clicking with sharp, rhythmic finality. Marcus opens the front door for me and follows me out into the crisp morning air, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind us. The lock clicks into place, sealing them inside the prison of their own making. I walk down the manicured driveway toward the waiting town car. The air smells clean and sharp. For the first time in my life, I feel completely untethered. The debt is settled. The past is buried. I step into the back of the car, ready to conquer the rest of the world. Marcus closes the heavy door of the Maybach, sealing me inside a quiet sanctuary of leather and mahogany. The engine purrs to life with a low, powerful rumble that vibrates through the floorboards. I sink back into the plush leather seat and exhale a breath I feel like I have been holding for 12 years. The slow, continuous tracking shot begins here, following alongside the sleek black car as it glides smoothly down the manicured driveway and passes through the towering wrought iron gates of the estate. I do not look back at the sprawling brick mansion. I own every square inch of that property now, but it holds absolutely no sentimental value to me. It is just another acquired asset on a corporate spreadsheet, another piece of highly leveraged collateral. The streetlights reflect off the tinted glass as we merge onto the busy highway, leaving the affluent, quiet suburb behind. The crushing weight I have carried since childhood, the desperate need for validation, the agonizing search for unconditional love is entirely gone. In its place is a profound, unbreakable serenity. 6 months pass with the ruthless efficiency of a well-executed business plan. The spectacular implosion of Connor and his fraudulent tech empire dominates the local news cycle for weeks. The federal prosecutors do not offer him any leniency or plea deals. He attempts to use his signature polished charm in the courtroom, trying to manipulate the judge and deflect the blame onto his gullible investors. It fails miserably. The paper trail is absolute and undeniable. Connor is convicted of wire fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. He is currently serving a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The bespoke Italian suits and luxury watches have been confiscated and replaced by a standard-issue khaki uniform. He is permanently stripped of his title, his stolen wealth, and his false progressive persona. He is nothing more than an inmate number assigned to a concrete cell, counting the thousands of days until his release. Jasmine experiences a brutal reality check so severe it borders on poetic justice. The federal government seized absolutely everything. The bank froze her personal checking accounts, the authorities impounded her leased luxury vehicles, and the lending agency foreclosed on her crumbling McMansion. The pristine golden child who spent her entire life looking down on the working class is now intimately acquainted with it. She lives in a cramped, dark, one-bedroom apartment in a run-down complex on the far industrial edge of the city. There is no doorman and no valet parking. She works 40 hours a week at a mid-tier retail store at the local mall, folding shirts, ringing up purchases, and organizing messy clearance racks. She spends her long shifts standing on her aching feet, serving the exact type of people she used to openly mock. Her precious social media accounts are completely deactivated. The carefully curated digital illusion of her flawless elite life shattered the second the FBI confiscated her devices for evidence. She is a ghost in the social circles she once ruled. Her wealthy friends abandoned her, instantly erasing her from their contact lists to avoid the lingering stench of a federal indictment. Terrence and Yvonne remain in the brick colonial house, but it has become a beautifully decorated prison. On the first day of every single month, a wire transfer hits my holding company account. It is the exact market rate rent down to the last penny. They do not miss a payment. They do not dare ask for extensions or grace periods. They know the identity theft file is sitting securely in my vault, ready to be handed directly to the district attorney the moment they breach the contract. But the severe financial drain is nothing compared to the absolute totality of their social execution. When the federal investigators officially released Connor's financial ledgers, the truth became public record. The entire congregation at their influential megachurch discovered exactly how their hard-earned retirement funds had been funneled directly into Yvonne's designer handbags and Terrence's luxury car leases. The community fallout was apocalyptic. They were immediately stripped of their prestigious leadership positions in the ministry. The exclusive country club formally revoked their membership. Their wealthy neighbors actively crossed the street to avoid walking past them on the sidewalk. When Yvonne goes to the grocery store, she wears dark sunglasses and keeps her head down, terrified of the hostile whispers and the pointing fingers of the people she used to command. Terrence has aged rapidly, losing his booming, authoritative voice and his arrogant posture. He took a humiliating entry-level job consulting for a minor logistics firm just to keep up with the monthly rent payments. They live in total isolation, trapped in the house they sold their souls to keep, terrified of the estranged daughter they threw away. My empire continues to expand without limits. The acquisition of the supply chain network was a massive success, doubling my net worth and securing my position as an apex predator in the corporate world. I sit in the back of the Maybach, the passing city lights washing over my face in a rhythmic golden glow. The camera locks onto my reflection in the dark glass, then slowly transitions to frame me directly. I look straight into the lens. There is no anger left in my eyes. There is only the absolute calm of a woman who conquered her own demons and built her own kingdom. They wanted me to be the family failure. I say, my voice steady and completely serene. But they forgot one thing. When you bury a seed in the dark, you don't destroy it. You teach it how to grow roots strong enough to crack concrete. I didn't just survive their shadow, I became the sun. The camera slowly dollies backward, pulling smoothly away from the window. The vibrant reflection of the towering city skyscrapers dances across the polished black surface of the car. The sleek vehicle merges into the endless river of lights on the highway, moving steadily forward into the night. The image slowly fades to black.